Thank you. Welcome to everyone joining. Welcome to our UK FinTech Week breakout panel titled Accelerating Digital Transformation Through Partnerships. We are starting in a couple of minutes at 1:05 BST. So welcome, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Hi everyone, welcome to our UK FinTech Week breakout session titled Accelerating Digital Transformation Through Partnerships. Really excited for this session. We will be starting in about 3 minutes at 1:05 BST. Feel free to introduce yourself, sharing your name, company, where you are joining us from. Hopefully you have better weather than we do in the UK right now, and any preferred social media links as well. Usually we would be able to have these events in a nice hotel or something or office in London, in the UK. So it's great to still be able to connect with all of you in attendance today. Hi everyone, again, welcome to our UK FinTech Week breakout session titled Accelerating Digital Transformation Through Partnerships. We are starting in 1 minute, but I do encourage you to share your name, company, where you are joining us from in the chat function as well. Okay, brilliant. We're going to start because we have a jam-packed agenda and I definitely don't want us to run out of time. So welcome everyone. Thank you for taking your time out to attend this UK FinTech Week breakout session titled, as I mentioned, Accelerating Digital Transformation Through Partnerships. This is an exciting hour-and-a-half session exploring real-life case studies and examples related to financial services partnerships. Thank you all so much for taking a time out of your busy schedules to attend this event. This event for attendees will mostly be listening, but we do have some interactive polls during the session as well, and a wide range of engaging speakers. We do, of course, welcome questions in the Q&A and comments and reflections throughout the session in the chat as well. So to introduce myself, my name is Mary Abdesamwa. I am a strategy and operations consultant at PwC, working with fintechs and banks, and I ran our latest scale fintech program, which is all about how we can work with interesting, innovative, growth stage B2B fintechs with interesting, innovative tech solutions. And the purpose of the program is really to support scaling fintechs on their expansion journey, to build relationships with ourselves, as well as to connect them to corporate clients. And I already see some familiar names in the audience, so really good to see you all again. Okay, so to start, I really wanted to share a bit of background as to why we are having this event. You might have seen in the World FinTech 2020 reports that 70% of fintechs say they are frustrated with an incumbent's financial institution's process barriers when collaborating. However, we know that financial services will not be delivered by a single organization going forward. So this event is all about exploring how we can unlock and accelerate the creation of fintech ecosystems, how fintech ecosystems can come together to create commercial success, and just as importantly, good customer outcomes. So these are the questions that we really want to dive in over the next 80 minutes or so during today's session. As you might have seen, PwC are sponsoring the theme of partnerships during this year's FinTech Week. And as an advisory firm, we believe we are uniquely positioned to see client challenges. So everything from cost pressures to changing customer expectations. And we believe we are kind of correctly positioned to work with incumbent organizations and fintechs to enable partnerships to solve industry problems. So I'm sure all of us on this Zoom will agree that the right partnerships between the right players can completely transform this industry. However, the landscape is complex and is increasingly crowded, and navigating it can be difficult for all stakeholders involved. So we are really excited to hold this session. We've got a range of speakers providing different perspectives. But that's enough for me. Let's hear from our speakers. So if we go on to the next agenda slide, please, Francesca. Amazing, thank you so much. Here you can see the rough agenda for this session. So for the next 80 minutes or so, please expect some interactive polls, a demo of our new Tessel next generation banking ecosystem, insights from us at PwC, as well as short TED Talk style perspectives from our speakers, and then a closing with a live Q&A. So it is pretty interactive. We do want you to ask questions, as I mentioned, using the Q&A function. And if you haven't already introduced yourself, stating your name, company, maybe where in the world you're joining us from, please do so. As you can see on the slide as well, the hashtag for this whole week, UK FinTech Week, is UKFW21. So do share your key learnings and thoughts across social media for those that couldn't attend, or to amplify the message further as well. Okay, let's dive in. I'm really looking forward to this. So I really wanted to start off with the PwC perspective on partnerships in fintech and financial services more broadly. So I am joined by 3 consulting partners, Steve Davis, Darshan Chandanara, and John Lyons. If you would like to come to the virtual stage, it'd be great to chat to you all. Welcome.
Hello.
Brilliant. So we can talk about what we think makes a good partnership from our experience working with both large organizations and fintechs. So please start off with an introduction to yourself and the work you do, but I'm really keen to hear your perspectives. And if I go to Steve, first of all.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, and good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, Steve Davis, a partner in PwC in our digital banking business. I've been involved in fintech for sort of 6 or 7 years now, I think, and it's great to be back at this event again and see everybody, see familiar faces, even if over the screen. I think one of the things, Mary, you asked for me to touch on is our work with Starling Bank. So we've worked with Starling since inception, and it's been a real privilege to be able to do that, but also lots of other fintechs that we work with as well. And I suppose, a couple of things, observations from my perspective would be, I think one of the things that Starling embraces is, as a fintech itself, sort of fintechs working together and collaborating to drive customer outcomes. And I think for me, that's one of the big changes over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, which is less about a bank or an insurance company or any company providing a sort of all-in solution. Everything is done in-house. It's about finding the right partners to deliver the right solutions for customers in the most effective and clever and beautifully designed way as well. And Starling's marketplace is a great example of that. I think the other thing for me to add a perspective is, for our own organization working with fintechs, I think, it requires us to be creative and imaginative and very sort of fleet of foot and flexible. And that's been a good sort of learning exercise for us. But we fully embrace that. And I think a lot of people that come to work in PwC are very keen to be engaging as part of the community.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Steve. And I really like that point you mentioned around the creativity, maybe the agile approach we have to take when working with fintechs as well. But also you mentioned around ecosystems. So Darshan, it'd be great to come to you for an introduction and your perspective as well.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. Hello, everyone. And thanks for the tee up, Steve. So Darshan Chandran, also a partner here at PwC, working in the financial services space. I tend to play around in the digital transformation space and within financial services across the board, really. My career is a little bit different, I guess, to some. I've played around in banking. I was, for the first 10 years of my life, I was in technology and banking. The next 10 years I spent in technology companies, so working for some of the larger players in the market. But just before I moved into consulting, I was the CMO of a fintech. So I've been on that side of the fence. I know what it's like to try and get the funding, try and work with people, try and get that first customer over the line. And partnerships are absolutely key to make that happen. And working with a wide ecosystem of partnerships is the right thing to do in lots of ways. But also part of my focus is really about how you leverage the bigger tech players out there. How do you work with the likes of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Salesforce, who all tend to have venture funds as well, and how that can work for you to your advantage. So part of the view here is, yes, we need to do the right thing for the clients and get fintechs involved, but also let's leverage the widest possible ecosystem in the right sort of way to make sure that we drive innovation forward across the board.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Darshan. And I really like what you say around the different stakeholders, also the non-financial services firms involved in this as well. And last but not least, over to you, John, to share. We're about to see a demo of Tessel, which we've been working on for a while. And I know you've been close to that work as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, and good afternoon. So John Lyons, I'm also a partner based out of London, and my role is to build our digital platforms business, which is a real privilege. I guess one thing I wanted to cover is what makes good partnerships, because the Tessel asset that we've developed over the last few years and enhanced, has 10 or more partnerships at any one point in time. And that's been a real learning for us. And I have to say, the best partnerships that I see is when each party really understands the value and the goals that the other party is trying to achieve and does enough diligence and sort of takes time to get to know each other, because there's no magic in this. There has to be a good fit in a number of different ways. And both parties need to see the incremental value of working together. I mean, we have seen a lot of challenges, and with PwC in the early days where, small agile organization meets big bureaucratic organization, and there's no magic just to that, but, people need to be realistic. They need to understand it, and people need to be, caring about that and understanding and have good communication and build trust between parties. It's like any relationship, it comes down to people and trust at the end of the day, and that's really important. So as you mentioned, PwC, we've been developing Tessel banking platform for the last 3 years. I mean, architecturally, it's designed to leverage an ecosystem of partners. And quite frankly, a lot of these partners provide much of the innovation of the end-to-end journey. So we would be, we just wouldn't have that offering without our partnership model. In a moment, you're going to see the mortgage demo. So it starts with someone looking for a property on Rightmove, and it finishes with someone actually moving in and using digital services to, move their utility bills on completion. So it follows a customer journey and not the product journey, and that's really, really important. And we wouldn't achieve this. So look, it's hard work scouring the market. As Mary said, there's lots and lots of, it's quite a crowded market, lots of fintechs out there, but it's time well invested in finding the right partnerships, because that's really where the value is. And what do we bring to the table? Well, we bring our engineering skills, we bring our relationships in industry. We design what we believe are the best user journeys with the right orchestration, with the very best business models, and all the boring stuff as well, like regulatory compliance and strong and efficient risk and control frameworks. But together as an ecosystem, we deliver the complete solution, and we couldn't do that without all of us working together. And I have to say, over the last 18 months, accelerated through COVID, the demand for these services is really accelerating, and we've seen a real uptick in this space. So it's very exciting. So I'll stop there, hand back to Mary, and hopefully get into the demo.
Amazing. Thank you, John. And thank you to Steve and Darshan as well. It's great to hear thoughts from yourselves, really setting the scene. And you've already touched on some topics that we will dive into further later on in the session as well. So I'm now passing on to Daryl, who is a product owner in our new digital banking ecosystem team, Tessel, that we've heard a lot about already. And he's going to do a short demo and explanation. And once he's done, we will have time for about 5 minutes of questions. So if you do have any questions about what you would have seen, please do use the Q&A function. Over to you, Daryl.
Cheers, Mary, and afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. As Mary said, my name's Daryl. I'm a manager in our banking and cap markets practice, but also work as our product owner for Tessel. So today, as John mentioned earlier, I'd like to take you through a demo, one of our 3 demo journeys, this is for mortgages, and really touching on how do we move from having a customer go from a product journey towards an outcome. And in this case, it's moving from a mortgage to home ownership. So today's demo is about Abby. Abby, she's 33. She's an existing Tessel customer, and she's looking for her first home. There's 3 value drivers that we've really focused on as part of today's demo. So the first is around, how does she know she's getting the best deal? How do we build on the relationship she already has with Tessel? And how do we make it a really easy and seamless application process? So let's get into the demo. So the demo starts with Abby receiving a proactive email from Tessel. We've recognised that based on the rise of income into her accounts and the status of the property market, now is the right time to act. And she's got a call to action to visit the Tessel Home Ownership Hub. And knowing that she's a joint business and retail customer, she can get the best deal. So let's go to Tessel. So a couple of things to call out just here on the homepage. Number 1, Tessel's a full service bank. We've got personal, business and corporate banking, but also what's in the name. Tessel is short for tessellation. And what we've tried to pull through is highlight how the modularity that you can get in a banking experience also covers through to the brand. And you can see that from the shapes that we've got here, as well as the name. So a few things to call out. Abby's, she's logged in. She's also got a personalized homepage around buy a new home. And we can scroll down and see what the options are. In this case, we're going to go for new home. We mentioned earlier, as John touched on, about property search. And what we've tried to do is bring in the property search experience into Tessel, but do that through integration. And that can be through anyone such as a Rightmove, for instance. So let's say Addie's looking for a property. She's interested in Clapham. She's found one that she's interested in, and we've pulled through some of the details. What we have here is actually one of our first integration points. So this is with Gazelle, and Gazelle are a prop tech provider. And one of the things that they have is called a seller's information pack. And what that lets you do is give you a bit more detail about the fittings and fixtures in the property, so you've got a bit more confidence. But let's go back to Tessel. So in here, we can configure our mortgage. Say she's got a £50,000 deposit, wants a fixed term. We can adjust the valuation, the term, and the fixed period. And we select on obtaining a bespoke offer. So what we're doing right now is we're calling to Mambu, our core banking platform. And we mentioned earlier that Abby's really keen to get the best deal. And so she can see different providers and the offers that they like. She likes what Tessel's got to offer. So let's click apply now. And in here now we get into the application journey. So what we've already done is started to port over some of the information that Abby selected when she was calculating her loan or trying to figure out what could be possible, so she doesn't need to rekey it. As an existing customer, we're also pulling through all the information that we've got on Abby, so she doesn't need to re-provide it back to Tessel. And I'll show you how we're doing that from a little bit later on. The same on the employment information side. Now, affordability can often be quite a big friction point when we think about a mortgage or home ownership experience. And here we've partnered with Credit Kudos, who I think you'll be hearing from later as well, to help with the affordability assessment. So Credit Kudos, for those of you who haven't heard of them, they're an open banking powered credit bureau. And what you can do is select from a range of banks to be able to pull through certain information. We're going to use the sandbox today. Now, within Credit Kudos, there's quite a few different smarts, and one of them, which is quite interesting in the API, is also understanding actually what are the accounts that you're pulling information from. So I've selected a credit card account, but we've recognized, they've also recognized that that's not the account we need, and we're asked to select another account to pull from, either a current account or savings. So select our test account. And then that Credit Kudos integration is pulling back the data from a trusted source that's going to populate our form. And I'll show you a little bit later on some of the really interesting MI that we're getting off the back of that. As we get into other parts of documentation, again, as an existing customer, Abby's provided a lot of the information we need, but we've recognized that her driver's license has expired and she's invited to undergo a biometric ID again. So from here, we've partnered with Yoti. And a couple of really interesting things I want to call out. We talked about touching on the FinTech ecosystem. One of the real benefits that we've recognized from this is actually being able not to build our own innovation roadmap, but actually leverage the roadmaps that's come from our FinTech partners. And one of those is actually just right here. So you can see that we've got a photo ID and a quick scan of your face. But one of the things that we noticed really quickly, we learned from speaking with Gareth, who you'll see later, is that they've added in proof of address checks. And in an afternoon, we were able to add that capability and deploy that into production. So we'll select, let's say, a utility bill for our proof of address. And then we can go and select our ID. In this case, it'll be a driver's license. Now, the second part is to take a selfie. Unfortunately, Abby's not with us today, so I'm going to have a go at stepping in and we'll see how that works. I can see that's completed. And we move through to say that it's been verified. We'll click continue. We can view a summary of the application, make any changes if we need to. But in this case, we'll submit. And we can see that Abby's received her decision in principle. I'll keep a note of that reference. So let's fast forward a little bit and show you what it's like to be a customer in Tessel. So a few things to call out. With the same ID or login, we can toggle between business and personal banking. We can check spending over time. And also this concept of spaces. So we talked about outcomes, and one of the things that we're really keen to convey is it's less about what are the products you have with a bank, but more about how does your relationship with a bank actually help you to achieve certain outcomes. So in this case, it might be home, it might be a holiday, or maybe saving up for a wedding. You can check your performance, but we can also connect apps as well through open banking. So let's go back to the mortgage. Let's say Abby has made an offer, it's been accepted. And one of the things that we're doing here is actually extending the mortgage journey and coaching the customer through to their path for home ownership. So I mentioned Gazelle earlier, and one of the things that Gazelle provides is a reservation agreement. And the reservation agreement is essentially an insurance contract that we have between the buyers and the seller, and there's a payout if the deal doesn't go through. John mentioned earlier about home setup, and here we're working with Just Move In at the moment, and we're building out an API with them that allows you to essentially book an appointment for services to help you switch over things like council tax, water, sewage, and the like. Now what I'd like to do is also show you what it's like to go under the hood of Tessel. So we showed the customer experience, but what does it mean to be an employee at Tessel Bank? So in here, we've got the employee view, and let's go to Abby's record. In here, we can see all the information that's been pulled through that was used to populate the form. We can see all of her relationships with the bank, but from a product perspective, her chat history, and also her recent applications. As you can see, we use Abby a lot, so she's got quite a few, but this was the one we created just now. So in here, we can capture the details, we can look through a decisioning process, but also what we're doing is we're plugging into the FinTech. So I mentioned Credit Kudos earlier, and we can start to hook in through to see actually what's the rich MI that we've got from a trusted data source that we can empower an agent to make a decision on. So we can analyze their probability, their affordability, sorry, any risk factors and spending over time. Equally, on the core banking side, we mentioned Mambu, who we use as our core banking platform for Tessel. And in there, we can see the bespoke product that we've created for Abby. We can see some of the details, the repayment schedule, and we can approve. One of the other items is, as we started to pull this data through, we can also get a rich set of MI, and so we can look at things such as the home ownership dashboard, and we can track performance across journeys for customers, engagement scores by team, but also business performance as well. Now, I know that it's generally not kosher to finish on tech for a demo, but I guess one last thing that I just wanted to highlight is the set of APIs that we're building, and what does it look like to really have that ecosystem that we've got in place for home ownership. But that's a really whistle-stop tour of the demo, Mary. Back to you. I think we've got a few questions as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Daryl. That was an amazing demo. That really brought to life FinTech partnerships, really seeing everything come together there. And having gone through a mortgage application process myself recently, I really liked how Tessel was just so swift and slick. And you could really see all the different components, really thinking about how do we make banking more personalized for this individual and really tailored to the next steps in their lifestyle. So really appreciate that. I know Darshan wanted to add a couple of comments as well.
Just a couple of things, really. What we showed was really a demo that we might put in front of a client and so on. So if you look under the covers for the FinTech folks out there, think of this as really a shop window. We've got so much to share, so much to tell, and bringing these components in to actually make it seamless. Yeah, to be totally honest with you, we've made it a bit more clunky than it needs to be because we wanted to show the seams between one product and another product. But when we do this for real, when we really put it in, there should be no sort of view of where they are, what company they're using. It will be completely seamless, and it'll be absolutely focused on the experience for the customer and making it that seamless journey from the right move conversation through to, you know, your keys being handed over and your removal men 15 minutes behind you. You should know that you've engaged with 15 different companies along that way and that they've used 30 different pieces of technology or 100 pieces of technology. That's the beauty of this. If it looked like we've shown the seams, that was a deliberate action.
Yes, I think that's a really good point to emphasize. The future of FinTech and financial services is invisible and just integrated. So I think that's fantastic. I see we have a question from Alan Moy in the Q&A function. If there are any further questions, please just put them in and we will try and get round to them. How safe is this for data privacy, since many companies are offering digital recognition for a security purpose? I pose that question to Daryl or any other PwC attendees as well.
Yep.
Daryl can take that one first.
Thanks, Dash. Really appreciate it. I think number one on the data privacy side, I think the key things that we look to take into account is number one is how secure are the integrations that we have. So think through about the penetration testing that we need to do, but also any due diligence that we would look to do with our fintech providers and understand where that data is stored more so than anything. Dash, is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, just on the security and privacy side of things, right? So ID&V is something that really has come to a fore since the pandemic has kicked in. We've worked with clients beforehand who are playing around with ID&V, but they've had to accelerate that whole journey. Whenever we're doing this type of technology and whenever we're working in this sort of space, we work with InfoSec, we go through all the checks and the privacy elements and the security teams. We work with cyber as well to make sure that the solution we put in is as secure as absolutely possible. And so that's fundamental to any solution. Customer experience, yes, but also safeguarding privacy and adhering to risk and reg. Those are all factors we take into account.
That's great, thank you. And we'll definitely dive into that a bit more, hearing from the partner side as well. We have another question from Emma in the audience. You mentioned there are 3 use cases and we saw the mortgage demo. What are the others?
Yep. So the other 2 are SME banking. It's actually a journey for a new to bank customer. This was just existing to bank, and it's looking at auto finance. So what's the process to look through that? And then there's how does that tie in with a relationship manager, which is really important in the SME banking space. The third journey that we've got is corporate banking. So this is more looking at sort of the middle-sized organizations. Obviously, that's a bit more complex as you start to look at multi-directors and how do we onboard, and also look at things like automated decisioning as well.
Mary, just to build on that, if I may, a couple of things. One, just go back to the previous question on privacy around ID&V. I'm sure Freddy from Kudos probably got some points to make, and when Freddy speaks later, so he can also add to that. I suppose the other thing around the journeys is they're exactly that, right? And to build on Darshan's point, this is not what we've just showcased isn't a PwC thing. For my framing, this is it's about orchestration, right? So we've got different parts of it. We've got a full suite orchestra, different groups playing different parts that are making the whole thing together. And you know, we might play a conductor role to assemble things and bring them together, but in reality, as anybody who's played in an orchestra knows, you play off the person next to you rather than the guy at the front waving the wand. So that person has quite a limited role, but it's how the whole thing comes together. So this is really about making the whole more than the sum of the parts, and I think that's the power of fintech partnerships, which is about if you do it right, it's a much better in terms of look and feel, in terms of cost, in terms of safety and security, than you would if a sort of single business, you know, traditional business would try and cobble those things together themselves. So that's really, you know, really want to make sure we hammer that point home.
Brilliant, thank you. I see we have a couple more questions rolling in. The next one is, what would you say is the biggest challenge to scale up this platform? And probably, if I can add on to that, what was the process like? Because obviously there were only 10 lucky fintechs selected to be part of Tessel this time round. What was the process we went through to select those companies?
Yep. So I'll probably work backwards from what you mentioned. If I think through the process we go to select fintechs, we're obviously in the market. We've got a lot of relationships, and we've also got our scale fintech program, and that keeps our finger on the pulse in terms of what's emerging and what's strong in the market. The second aspect is the joys of being as part of an audit firm. We do have some robust process. So there's a lot of checks that we'll do, that includes AML and the like. So we feel confident with the fintechs we're partnering with. And then as we go into JBRs, we actually do a technical test with our own sandbox to say, yes, does this work as required? So that's the journey we've gone on, but we're always looking to refine and improve our platform because it's such an evolving space at speed. I think the question around scale is a really interesting one. I think for me, it's more about how do we start to integrate more, and Steve's point around the orchestration factor is really key. How do we get that right as you've got more and more fintechs or more and more partners in your ecosystem that you win? And then how do you build that across journeys? So are they separate Are they linked? Are they integrated? I think those are some of the key elements that I would think of, but I'd throw it back to sort of John and Steve if there's anything more to add on that.
I mean, I'd just add, we do go through a very thorough process around choosing the right partners, as I said before, because at the end of the day, we develop this platform, we deploy this platform for real banks and real regulated entities, and therefore we need to be confident around the level of maturity, the level. I mean, you mentioned security, you know, the diligence around some of the information security credentials that they have, and the ability to scale around the target environments. Because quite frankly, if we don't pick this up, then, you know, the banking client doing their due diligence will only pick it up later. So we do go to a lot of trouble in really understanding the fintechs, understanding their maturity, understanding the maturity of their technology and the safety of their technology, and making sure that we're doing the right thing for us, the right thing for our partners, and the right thing for our ultimate clients, the banks. So I think we do spend a lot of time on that.
Brilliant. We've just come to time, so I'm going to have to end this session here. But that was fantastic. I hope all the attendees are excited as I am. I think that was a brilliant demo. So thank you, Daryl, and really good to hear your perspectives as well, Dash and Steve and John. If anyone wants to find out more, I see we still have questions coming in. We will share Daryl's chats in the we'll share his email in the chat function, so you can ask any questions if you want to arrange a demo for your organization as well. So brilliant, thank you all for your time. We are now entering part 2 of this event, so we will hear some different perspectives on the importance of driving fintech partnerships and take part in some live polls, or some of you that are a bit more competitive might call that quiz questions. And so let's start off with the first poll now. So I'm just going to launch that for you all. So you should be able to see this. The question is, by how much has the usage of fintech apps across Europe changed since the beginning of the pandemic? Feel free to vote now. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Brilliant. Last couple of votes coming in now. Brilliant. So I'll just end there. And the correct answer was C, 72% increase, which most of you put, which is really, really interesting. Yes, real big drive due to the pandemic in the usage of fintech apps. So on that theme of fintechs, I will now pass on to Freddy Kelly, CEO of Credit Kudos, which you've heard about a lot already, a challenger credit reference agency utilizing open banking to help financial institutions make better and faster credit decisions. Freddy is particularly passionate about the applications of new data and algorithms to promote better outcomes for individuals, and particularly those that have been excluded from mainstream financial services. Credit Kudos, as you saw, were a partner of ours to create Tessel, and just hot off the press on Monday, announced a partnership with Curve, the fintech that brings all of your cards into one smart card in its forthcoming Curve credit product. So over to you, Freddy.
Thanks very much, Mary. Really appreciate being included in today's session, and obviously really excited about our inclusion in Tessel as well. I guess I'll give a quick introduction on the business, though. You saw some glimpses just then during the demonstration of what we do. Credit Kudos is a regulated credit reference agency and open banking provider. So we sit at the intersection of open banking data and credit decisioning. And what that means is we're using both open banking data as a forward-looking signal from customers when they're applying for credit, but also subsequently loan performance data on the back end to understand those two things in context and see through machine learning what it is about open banking and consumer financial behavior that correlates to credit risk and the propensity and ability for a customer to repay. And I thought that poll just then was really interesting. We've actually seen over 500% growth in people using our reporting system over the last 12 months. And a lot of that has been driven by both the digitization function, so people being at home and paperwork and some of the stuff that you'd normally see in perhaps a mortgage process or a credit application just being completely impossible, but also the change in sort of economic environment, meaning that more data is needed to underwrite, and something like open banking just gives a much more holistic picture of an individual and their unique risk profile, and lenders are, you know, very aware that that's more and more important now than it perhaps ever has been before. I'm going to start just quickly sort of talking about our experiences in working with the Tessel proposition and how we fitted in. I'd like to think that, you know, it's a really good demonstration of how, you know, focusing on doing one thing really well means that through partnership you can kind of combine the best solutions for each sort of aspect of a customer journey or a customer proposition to get sort of best in breed, and then come to a proposition like the one we just saw, where you've got, you know, different providers providing their kind of specific core competencies and fitting things together. I think from our perspective, what FinTech means is that kind of sort of co-opetition stuff that we all hear about. You know, there's obviously no argument about the size of the market, but we're all kind of sort of innovating on different areas, and this type of structure, especially now in a sort of more API-led ecosystem, means that we can really quickly and sort of fluidly fit different building blocks together to build propositions and go to market. And we love that, and we you know, actively encourage our customers to do the same thing. In terms of what sort of success looks like and how we found these things working best, obviously alignment around vision, around cultural fit, all the kind of sometimes sort of things that sound fluffy but are really important, have made a massive impact in our experience. The other thing, not just around shared vision, but that we've found really important is the shared sort of client base or shared prospect. You know, trying to kind of find a problem for a solution obviously doesn't work, and so it's really important that you have a driving voice for what you're building. And we found, you know, through working with the team at PwC and with other partnerships that we've had experience of, you know, that kind of combined driver of, you know, this is the customer, the stakeholder or stakeholders, and this is the problem that we're solving for them, and just being very laser focused on that has been, you know, a key sort of differentiator for successful partnerships versus those that perhaps aren't. I guess that the other thing that's worth mentioning, and Mary, you mentioned that the Curve partnership earlier, but the flexibility, I think, in partnership has been really key. You know, we kind of work around different solutions to achieve an end product, and whereas I think traditional financial services has been quite, there's been a sort of this classic problem of kind of loyalty by inertia. It's particularly in our industry where, you know, the preferred solution is often the one that's less painful to integrate. What we've found through sort of the propositions that we've built now is that because there's a lot of flexibility, you know, REST APIs are standardized, OAuth is standardized, open banking is standardized. We've got this kind of more level playing field now, where if you've got a really strong value proposition around one certain use case, so say lending or credit affordability, then it's really easy for you to fit in around the other component parts of that process, as we've just seen. So I think we're in a kind of different era of partnerships, and that's something that's definitely been demonstrated through our work with Tessel, with companies like Curve and with others. I guess just one sort of parting thought on this before we kind of go into any questions. I think that the sort of the differentiation for us as a business in the realm of open banking and you know, the massive sort of vast area of opportunity that presents is really on what we don't do rather than what we do. I think it's something that often people kind of get wrong. You know, I think part of the reason, and hopefully this will be echoed by Steve and the team, but part of the reason that we were in the magic 10 or whatever we're calling ourselves is that we, you know, we know very well what the bounds of what we do are and what we've focused our attention on. And, you know, when you're a venture-backed fintech company, it's really valuable to kind of have a very clear mission and just kind of know where that begins and ends. And for us, that's how do we get maximum value from this new and emerging data source for the application of lending. It's not all the other bits and pieces that you hear about that are also very exciting about open banking. So I think that that sounds obvious, but I think it's a really important thing to remember, and I think one to end on. I remember, Steve, you also asked about the ID&V question, so I can maybe just address that. The data sharing question, I think, is a really important one. It's the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about new data sources. I think one thing to be really clear on is that with open banking, we're actually in a much better place than we were with historical methods of ID&V verification or affordability verification, in the sense that it's customer first, the customer is giving consent, it's explicit in the journey. So there's no ambiguity about what the purpose of that data is, what the duration of the data is being held for, and what their kind of rights are to revoke that consent. I think there is a separate and probably longer debate around what ID in the context of open banking really means, because for a long time, whether we explicitly acknowledge it or not, banks have kind of been a key tenet of how we verify identity. It's send me your bank statement with your address on it. And so whilst that's not their core product, it's a kind of accident of the way that we rely on banks to verify identity at the moment. And so there are questions about how we translate that into an open banking ecosystem that probably fit more broadly into the open finance discussion, but that's probably one to take offline.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Freddy. You really did get our brains going with so many different points that you mentioned there. I particularly like what you mentioned around the importance of the fluffy stuff, as you said, culture fit and vision when you're thinking about partnerships as well. So if you have any questions for Freddy, please post them in the Q&A, indicating that they are for Freddy, and we'll get to them at the end of this segment. So I'll now pass on to Gareth Narinesingh, who is Commercial Director for Financial Services at Yoti, who you also saw during that Tessel demo just then. Yoti provide identity verification solutions for banks and financial institutions more broadly, and have worked with the likes of other fintechs such as Fetch AI, enabling identification in blockchain-based ecosystems. Over to you, Gareth. We can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, hi everybody. I hope you can hear and see me okay. My name's Gareth Narinesingh. I'm the Commercial Director for Financial Services at Yoti. Yoti is a biometric digital identity platform. We use facial biometrics to perform an identity match against the government issued photo ID of an individual. So in a very short user journey, lasting usually no more than 2 minutes, we can prove that a person is real, and we can also prove that they are the person who they say they are. Now, we are designed and architected with privacy in mind, and security is at the forefront of the way we do things. If anybody would like some more information on that, then I'm very happy to come back to that in Q&A. I know that's a big question around at the moment. So what I'd like to do is just talk to you a little bit about my experiences of partnerships. The first thing to say is that I want to offer a massive congratulations to the team at PwC for what they've done. As someone who works in innovation and product integration, what they've done is no small feat, and I think it brings into the market something which is new, innovative, and quite frankly, it doesn't exist anywhere that I can see. So that is really what we're all seeking to do. We're all seeking to build things which didn't exist yesterday and bring them to the market because there is a client need or demand for that. That might be a business need, or it might be a regulatory requirement. That's the space that we play in. It's a space of innovation which is really fast moving, and it's very exciting. And that's why I love my job and I love this space so much. So, what are clients looking for? Well, to put it simply, they're looking for as much utility, service, and functionality as they can get through as minimum number of APIs as possible. So what Yoti does, we provide a great service. The service is kind of needed from a regulatory compliance perspective, but actually it's a cog that sits in a much broader wheel, which is, the wheel of customer onboarding. electronic KYC. We do a really core aspect of that with the ID verification, but we don't do the entire thing. So partnerships are about kind of looking at what clients need from an end-to-end perspective and making sure that you can build and enhance the features and functions of a product to fit that client. And no one person, no one organization can do that by themselves. They have to partner up with other products, other companies to build a technology stack that then is accessible to the client, preferably through one API. And it's, the good news for everyone is that PwC have managed to do that with the Tessel project. So well done to you guys. But when you're looking around for those partners and those products, what's the mindset that you need to go through? Well, I mean, my view on the world is this, you need to take a risk. So no two organizations are naturally going to be, a great immediate day one fit for each other. You have to build a deep relationship, which means that you have to trust and believe in the shared vision of what you're going to do, which is what Freddy actually said. From my perspective, I'd like to go one step further. And I think that if that shared vision is for society, if that shared vision is for the greater good, then there is no better shared vision that you can arrive at with your partners. Yoti is an ethical company. We're B Corps registered, which means that we are here for the purposes of people generally in society. We're not here just for the benefit of our shareholders, which is something that I think a lot of elite football clubs could pay good note towards in light of the European Super League. But we also have a Guardian Council. So our Guardian Council holds our board of directors to account really for the work that we do and the corporate strategy. As I said before, I think innovation is a really fast moving sector. Things do not sit still for a minute. If you're not building things quickly, that's not to say that you don't build things carefully, but unless you're moving at pace, somebody else is going to do it. It doesn't have to be someone in the UK, it can be someone else in the world, and they will get to market quicker than you. So you have to find a partner who is equally willing to move at pace. That might mean working very hard. It might mean speaking every day. It might mean having tough conversations sometimes when you hit a bump in the road. But actually, with the right relationship, you can do that. So that's really all I had to say about partnerships, my regard for Tessel as a product. So if that's okay, back to you, please, Mary.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gareth. And I really liked what you said around taking the shared vision even further, thinking about the impacts and benefits for customers as well. So thank you so much for sharing on that. And moving at pace, that's really important as well. So we're going to do another poll. So let me just launch the second poll. And this is to kind of tee us up for our next speaker, Marilena from the British Business Bank. Just under 1 million small business loans were accessed to support their cash flow during the crisis through schemes delivered by the British Business Bank. Is this true or false? You have about 20 seconds to answer that question now. But yeah, we're really excited to hear from Marilena, Director of Venture Solutions and the Future Fund, a £1 billion plus fund launched by the government in May last year as a response to the pandemic. And her previous career has been spent largely across financial services in corporate finance and investment banking. And we're really looking forward to hearing her perspective. The answer to that question is actually false, because as at the 25th of March, there were 1,630,155 government-backed loans worth over £75 billion given to small businesses. So you can see the impacts of what the British Business Bank has done has been really, really impactful. So yeah, it's over 1 million small business loans have been given out. It's kind of a trick question there. So over to you, Marilena, really interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Thanks for the invite today. I'm just here to give you a bit of of a background in terms of the British Business Bank, and as part of that also the Future Fund, which was one of the COVID-19 schemes launched by the government last year. So just to touch upon the importance of partnerships in terms of ourselves delivering our mission that we have. Just as you said, I'm a director in the Future Funds team as part of the British Business Bank's Venture Solutions, and I've been in the bank since its inception and even pre-inception while we were designing the bank back in 2013-14. I mean, we're a relatively newly established economic development bank, which was launched on the back of the financial crisis, where the government realized that obviously when things go wrong, the market shut down, and immediately the first ones to be left out are the small businesses that lose access to finance. So in this way, I mean, the bank was developed to try and avoid such situations arise. And we've been at the position that even pre-launching of the COVID schemes, when we look at our funding, we basically work very much in partnership with the markets, and all of our funding comes in the form of our funds investing alongside the private sector, and a number of our programs are established across the debt and equity type of finance products, and there we have more than 180 or so of finance partners that we work with to be able to provide funding to small businesses. And a number of those partners are FinTechs, which cover all sorts of things from platforms to just tech-enabled finance providers that allow smaller business to have a better access to funding. And through our programs, we had given more than 8 billion of funding and support to more than 100,000 businesses across the UK. And then we came out into the pandemic world in April 2020, where we launched a number of schemes over the summer, including the CBILS, BBILS, bounce back loans, and then shortly thereafter, the equity focused Future Fund. And through those, as you said, Mary, we have given actually more than 76 billion of support to date through more than 2 million funding facilities. And that would not have been actually possible if we didn't have 100 or so plus delivery partners through which we could deliver all these schemes. So partnerships basically lie in the core of what we do, and in being able to support our mission, which is to make the finance markets more efficient for smaller businesses, and ensuring that there is supply and diversity of funding through any period of both good and bad in the economy. And in terms of looking at the Future Fund and specifically in our collaboration with PwC, I mean, the Chancellor announced the launch of the Future Fund in April 2020 on the back of first the initial schemes announced were more debt focused, and there was a very early realization that a lot of the innovative early stage businesses, where many of them were non-revenue generating or non-profitable, they could not access some of the loan schemes. As such, we launched the Future Fund that was going to be looking at the ability to finance businesses through the convertible loan instruments, where in such period of crisis, people were not ready to price, how much is the equity worth in a business in the middle of not knowing what the outcome will be tomorrow of the business with the uncertainty in the markets. What has been critical, I mean, is the innovative way of which we look to deliver the program, working very much with PwC in finding a way to establish a portal so as to make the process a lot more efficient online for parties to come on board in terms of the investors and the investee companies, so apply for their funding and give all the information all done online through a portal. So everything being done in one place with all the information being made available and transparent. I mean, for us, it was quite important to make sure there's a smooth customer journey and as efficient as possible, so as to make sure funds could be released as quickly as within over 2 to 3. It's been quite a tremendous effort to make the portal work, and it showed how important it is to work collaboratively and also to be able to be flexible and agile, because a lot of these technology solutions you should be able to amend quickly and fix, I guess, or enhance the capabilities, because as we go through the program, we realize, things could be done better. And also as we moved away from looking at the application process, we're also using the portal as part of our portfolio management. So it's quite it's quite tremendous. I mean, the ability of the technology today and the integration of so many different plugins and solutions to allow you to have a beginning to an end process, from making an application and then also managing the investments and communication and information through a portal, which allows us to actually be looking at what we currently have, which is more than a billion plus fund with more than 1,000 companies that we have invested in. So the portal allows us to be efficient and being able to actually interact with all these businesses in the most efficient manner going forward, and also collecting the information with one source of the truth, because the portal also acts as our CRM, in addition to all the data and information that is captured there as part of the process and the ongoing portfolio monitoring. I think all of this showed the importance of our partnerships and working, collaboratively with the PwC team to make sure we can deliver something which I think a few years back would not have been possible, given the technology, how it has evolved over the years. This is a bit in a nutshell, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marilena. And yes, I'm sure we'll have some questions coming through. And I think it's just so powerful to hear you say how integral having many different partners has been to your success as well. So really looking forward to diving into that, and also all the really interesting insights that come from the management information and data, as you mentioned as well. Time is up against us, which I knew would happen because there's just so many interesting people part of one event. So for the final poll, we have the third question. You should be able to vote now. What percentage of banks have achieved the desired return on investment from FinTech collaborations? So you've heard us speak a lot about collaborations, partnerships, ecosystems, all the jargon. What percentage of banks currently do you think have achieved the desired return on investment from these collaborations? You have about 10 seconds. Brilliant. I see lots of votes coming in. We will get to questions just after our next two speakers. And if I end the poll there, most of you put 21%, but actually currently as at 2020, if you read the World FinTech 2020 reports, only 6% of banks have achieved the desired return of investment from FinTech collaborations, which is just crazy, really shocking. So there's so much more that we can do in this space. So I now pass on to Luke Waddington, who is CEO and co-founder of Bluefire AI, a pioneering capital markets intelligence platform. They were also part of our latest Scale FinTech program. So I'll pass on to Luke to share for a couple of minutes around his thoughts around FinTech partnerships.
Hi, yeah, so thanks very much for inviting me. Yeah, just a quick introduction. So we're a company that basically automates human decision making, and especially around companies. And we are pretty good at saying when companies are making decisions, when companies are looking quite risky and maybe going into stress. But it's not about necessarily talking about Bluefire, it's about talking about partnerships. I'd say there's one core point that I'd probably like to make on this webinar around partnerships. And it sounds like a distilled and simple message, but I think it becomes at the heart of partnerships, and that is fintechs walk up to partnerships and they have very good outputs. And every time you talk to a fintech, you'll hear about all these great outputs, and they control those outputs really well. And then on the bank side or the asset management side or the client side, they control the outcomes. And what we find is that those things are not always close to each other. And people believe that sometimes they are. And we use these terrible phrases like plug and play, which I just think it doesn't exist in this world, because there's always a friction between the output and the outcome. And I think when you actually delve into that phrase quite a bit, if the client you're working with wants a different outcome, that involves change. And it involves culture change, process change, workflow change. So there's got to be a very upfront conversation about the difficulties of what that means. And that's controlled by the client. And most of the time, the fintech cannot and can't control any of that outcome. And therefore, they could produce something very good and they could spend a lot of time on a very good output. But if it doesn't achieve an outcome and it goes to that 6% return on investment statistic, then the partnership won't work. And so up front, there's got to be a case of what they want as an outcome. The other thing, though, is that if that outcome is much more about just wanting to do something better, it's not about change, then that comes about and becomes a point about then integration, and integrating into an existing process to make it better and cheaper. And it's got to be a well-known sort of conversation to know if that's what you're aiming at. And that's an easier thing to solve, to go in and just do something better and cheaper, but that thing already exists. And then that can be a target that's much easily performed on. But that sort of then cuts across the heart of some of the innovation and the pride we have as fintechs, wanting to always do something new and change the world. Sometimes you don't have to change the world, you just have to do the world better and cheaper. And then that can make a very direct line to a partnership. So I think for me, this all sort of comes down to the distance between output and outcome. And the narrower you can make that distance up front, the more chance of success. And the wider the distance between those two things, the harder it is to ever achieve any positive outcome. So yeah, that's my my sort of partnership to Peneth, and you'll probably see the hairiness and the unkept nature of my my appearance, and that is because I've been through the pain of the distance between output and outcomes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Luke. I really like how you're really honest about that. And you spoke about the upfront difficult conversations that need to be had. You spoke about the myth of plug and play. And yeah, sometimes you have to, it is challenging, it is difficult. And I really, really like the analogy around the gap between output and outcome and how we can make that smaller. So over to our final speaker, Sahel. Keep the questions coming in through the Q&A section. Sahel Raja is the head of execution platforms and the UK Chief Digital Officer at Societe Generale. So over to you, Sahel, to hear your perspective.
Thanks, Mary. I'll keep this short in the interest of time. It's a nice follow on from Luke, actually. We've had a couple of dealings from other conversations and now through PwC Scale and also through our Global Markets Incubator. Luke and his team are working with our cohort in Asia. And I think that's an example. And going back to Luke's point about outcomes and opportunities, and I think, you know, that gap is important to be able to bridge. And me coming from the business side or the platform business side makes it a little bit easier to understand what those challenges are. And I think that some of the challenges we may have had in the past is where we've had lots of ideas, lots of fintechs approaching the bank, but not necessarily of value or being able to resolve a problem or a solution or be able to come back with a cost benefit or any kind of benefit, really. And that just created frustration both on the bank stakeholder side and also on the fintech side. So what we've been trying to do with fintechs, particularly in the UK, is develop partnerships with the likes of PwC and some others, which will formalize over the next year or so, to be particularly focused on those partnerships that will bring us outcomes in terms of good conversations and solving real problems and actual use cases that are being driven directly from people like myself and also other business stakeholders who have a vested interest in terms of finding solutions. So that's one aspect. The other kind of partnerships are internal as well. We mustn't forget that from an incumbent perspective, that there are a lot of people in the organization who have a lot of knowledge, but don't necessarily know who's come up with an idea before. There might be a solution to that problem already. There may be someone else who's talking to another fintech, and then trying to bring those conversations in, in a smart way, so that we can know exactly what is going on with the conversation. So that could be somebody from my area, somebody in the business side, operational. SG Innovation is one of the main areas that we work with as well internally. SG Ventures, and then the Global Markets Incubator, and tying all of those in to make sure that we're having a single conversation both internally but also with the fintechs themselves. So it's an easier conversation to have. The other side of it is open source is a big play for us, and in terms of our tech stack or fintech stack, we kind of have a model and a platform that follows exactly what you would find with other fintechs in terms of cloud, in terms of APIs, in terms of agile and all of that, the lovely phraseology, as it were. But that was implemented over 5 years ago within the SG Markets platform, which is our business-to-business wholesale platform. And just on Global Markets Incubator, we're running another incubator session with our team based in Paris, but looking for UK B2B startups to be part of that. And the next cohort starts in May. So we're doing that every at least once or twice a year in the various locations. And on the final part regarding partnerships, the other partnerships we work quite closely on are with universities, for example. We're doing some work with UCL FinTech to look at hyper-personalization and what that might mean for capital markets, because we talk about data a lot, or is mentioned a lot, but it's getting to the point of how do we use that, but what does that mean from a customer-centric perspective, and how can we develop that? We're also looking at CBDCs, that's been mentioned this week as well, working closely with the Bank of France, but also with our internal startup called Forge, which launched a structured products token solution last week and was tested. And the final area that I'm involved in is partnering with University of Chichester as I'm a governor there, where we're looking for aspects to understand what new models may look like and what those business models may look like and what those financial solutions are likely to be there in terms of both financial models, but also in terms of tech solutions. If you take one of the big areas they're involved in are games, esports, arts, and seeing what that might look like in terms of products and models going forward. And I think that's my time up. I'll try to keep it short anyway, Mary. So hopefully that brings back some of the time back.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sahel. And you already, that was a great short talk. And I really liked how you mentioned other partners that we haven't heard of already. So thinking about universities as well, and also the entrepreneurship element. So talking about Forge, your internal startup as well. So now I'm going to dive straight into the Q&A. So if you haven't already, please do continue to share your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom. So I'd like to welcome back Gareth from Yoti, Freddy from Kudos, Marilena from the British Business Bank, Luke from Bluefire AI, and Sahel that we just heard from, as well as John Lyons from PwC. If all our panelists can imagine that they are on countdown, so 30 seconds or less for responses. We want to keep it pretty quick fire so that we can get through as many questions as possible. So I'm going to firstly go to Kudos. And earlier we spoke a bit about cybersecurity, and from our latest PwC CEO survey, the top threats causing extreme concern for financial services organization is cyber threats, where 51% of UK financial services CEOs said that was their number one threat, followed by pandemics and over-regulation as well. So would you agree that cybersecurity is the major challenge, and maybe some other challenges such pitfalls that you've seen in your own experience or anecdotally through FinTech partnerships? So over to you first, Freddy.
That's a lot in 30 seconds. I mean, security is paramount. No matter what we're talking about, new or old, that's always been the case. I think when it comes to the context of this conversation in partnerships, there's a natural challenge when big works with small, when it comes to how larger corporates deal with vetting suppliers. And I'm pleased that things like the Tech Nation standard that's built around how you do procurement is starting to come into play. But for us, it's being able to stand up next to the best and being ISO certified, having regular audits, having penetration tests, having all the stuff that you'd expect. And given that we started with a blank sheet of paper when it comes to information architecture, we've been able to build with a very modern system in place and take advantage of things that didn't exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when mainframes were kind of commonplace. So it's something that I think we have a strength in, because we're a FinTech and we've built things from the ground up with that in mind.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, I really like that idea of kind of building things your own from scratch as well. I'm going to pose the same question to Gareth again around the cybersecurity. There is also a question for you in the Q&A around whether Yoti can verify the ID for all nationalities as passport holders. So it'd be great if you could address that as well. But I think in particular around digital identities, I think everyone's bought into the idea that they're more convenient, but are they also more secure? So over to you, Gareth.
They have to be. So I can't talk about all digital identity platforms because they all do things in a very different way. But the way that Yoti does things is by taking the ID attributes from the documents, so whether that's the image, whether that's the name, date of birth, surname, gender, passport number, etc. We separate each individual data attributes. We separately encrypt them by 256-bit AES, and then we fire them off into secure tier 3 data centers in the UK, and we shard them. So they're put into our services in a logical fashion. The only person who can actually bring down that identity in a logical fashion to recreate the identity is either the client, because they've got a key, or individual who has the Yoti app on their phone, and they've got the private key to bring it down in one go. So that is tip-top security.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing and shedding light on that as well. I wanted to come to Marilena from a British Business Bank perspective. I know you mentioned during your short talk earlier about the management information and the data that you have access to. Can you shed a bit more light around that as well, and just maybe how you're managing risks in relation to partnerships and your different stakeholders?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Happy to. In terms of the portal, obviously, there are checks in terms of the data, which also links to other data providers, which again, that's the beauty of a lot of the technology and fintech, so that you can make sure does it actually verify with the other sources if you're linking into kind of company's house data, PitchBook data, Bohus data, there's so much kind of different sources, Experian, so all the things that we have access to, I guess, is kind of trying to make sure how you overlay that with other information and data so that you can say, is this correct? And obviously it's all part of the data analytics we are building up as part of the portfolio and the access of information we have. Because if we think about how many businesses we have funded over the years and how much data exists, I guess, within the organization, there's a big focus at the moment of how best to utilize that data and actually use it in a way to be able to make it better, assessment of the book and overlays as well. I mean, and these are things which is all building up at the moment, because obviously we are growing as an organization ourselves. As I said, we are pretty new in many ways, and the technology is out there. So a lot of that effort has been done to bring all of these things in and to come together, because that's important. I mean, because as the party said, obviously you can't just take everything you're given. I mean, you have to test and find ways to verify from other sources as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'd also love to get John's perspective from a PwC perspective around risks in relation to partnerships as well.
Yeah, by all means. I enjoyed those lovely 4 weeks from the period from the Chancellor making his announcement to having the portal live. And it's good we've had the demo of Tessel, because that was actually the platform that we reconfigured for British Business Bank, because there's no way we would have achieved that outcome without having that pattern and that solution built. So Marilena is absolutely right. We had the integrations through a company called Dudil, and then out to enhanced data with Companies House. We checked when the company was registered. We checked it was eligible. We went out to Bohus data around previous sort of investments. We used LexisNexis for the ID&V. So that pattern, was there, it was built, it was integrated, and it's only having those trusted sources of data that we can verify against that we could build that solution quickly enough and be confident that actually we had quality data being ingested, and we could reject anything that we didn't think was right.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. I'd now like to go to Sahel, because we've obviously dived quite a lot into the idea of partnerships and collaboration, and 86% of banks cite fintech partnerships as the top priority for them. But actually, it can be hard to see what's really happening. Is it all just talk? What do you see as the role of fintech partnerships in a way to diversify and increase revenue streams? And do you have real concrete examples of how that's happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as I mentioned briefly, the challenge previously has been around to identify real opportunities when we're talking to the fintechs, and that could be, I'm sure Luke can give a view on Bluefire, but if I give another example with our efficiency play, which is part of the cohort that we're looking going forward around efficiency, around costs, around workflow, and improving our customer input or information back to clients, that has to really have a strong use case. We really do need a business sponsor behind that and a real business case, whether that be new profit line, or increased profitability, or reduce cost, or improve the relationship with the client. That's key before we even start talking to any fintech out there who might be able to propose a solution. And I think without that, most fintech relationships and engagements won't really get past the first door.
Agreed. Luke, similar question to you around fintech partnerships. What have you seen around ways to really make them viable, and maybe criteria you're using to select partners as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Sohail says is really important. I think, and that's what you sort of see with things like the work that SocGen have done, is they start to actually frame out what it looks like. So it's not just about sort of expecting an outcome. And you'll see me go back to that theme all the time. It's about having some structure to that. And then therefore, when a fintech or a partner turns up, there's an understanding of that structure, of how it sort of, and I think you can use frameworks like incubations, you can use proof of concepts and these sort of structures, but they have to be well thought out in advance. There's a lot of just have a go and just experiment, go off. And I think that's where, there's a bit of romance in that, but it's not necessarily going to create a marriage.
I love the analogy. Thank you, Luke. Freddy, Credit Kudos, I would like to come back to you and really maybe change the conversation a bit to talk a bit more about customers, and especially, I know you're predominantly kind of B2B, but you do have an element that works directly with customers as well. And given open banking is all about helping customers realize that banks don't own their data, actually they do. How have you thought about the benefit of partnerships from a customer perspective, and do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, open banking is all predicated on trust. And so the conversation is kind of irrelevant if you don't have trust and willingness from the customer to share data in the first instance. A big part of that comes down to brand for us. We've built our messaging around what we do for the end users, as well as what we do for the businesses that use our products. And that's been really important to drive the conversion rates that we have, which are really, really strong. And so, little things like if you Google our name when you're going through an application, you'll find something that's approachable and friendly and isn't corporate and cold and blue. So that's been a really important differentiator for us and something we've worked on. I think the other part of it is, you're looking for someone to be a trusted custodian of your data. And so many of the companies we work with actively get value from us as being that independent party. When you think about credit risk, you don't want to be sort of marking your own homework when it comes to how you're processing this data. So it's really important that there is another entity involved in that process, and having that brand positioning is a factor for us, and it does drive those partnership conversations, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Freddy. And I'd really love to get John's perspective, because at PwC, we're always talking about building trust in society. And it's actually really interesting to think about the differences between trust between technology companies and financial institutions. John, do you have a perspective on how partnerships, again, can address this?
Yeah, I do. Trust is fundamental, and trust is a nice emotional word, but it has to have an element of business logic behind it as well. So particularly in financial services, where you're regulated, you have customer data that needs to be protected and various things like that. So like all things, there is an element of being clear when you enter into a partnership that actually it's going to work from a relationship and trust perspective. But equally, you need to understand what the joint responsibility model is. You can't just sort of have a go at something not quite understanding what each party brings to the table, and you have to have a goal and an outcome in mind, or else you do just iterate, and that's not a route to value, and both parties would want value. So I think for me, it is having that trust. It is having a common goal that you can both build behind and both believe in. It is about having a joint responsibility model. So so people understand what both parties are bringing to the table, and then you're on a reasonable footing. I do think there has to be, particularly with large organizations and fintech, there has to be a lot of give and take, and there has to be, you know, a consideration for balances of power. So I think that, you know, large organizations do need to be flexible and support fintechs as they come through.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. And I'd really like to come to Gareth from a Yoti perspective, changing the conversation to, again, still linked to trust, but really thinking about the fact that how that might be slightly different from a B2B fintech perspective. B2B fintech definitely in 2021, it feels like it's all the rage. We've recently just seen Ramp become a unicorn in less than 2 years with their corporate credit card startup and Modular, and there's so much happening in this space. What would you say? Do you have any thoughts and opinions on the space around B2B fintech and trust more generally as well?
Goodness, well, I mean, it was about sort of, you know, the ability for a business to scale and grow and do really well to sort of, you know, reach that ultimate goal of becoming a tech unicorn. Then you could not put a bet on who the winners and losers are going to be. So everybody's got products. Everybody does things in a very different way. Even in a niche sector like digital identity, there's at least 3 dozen global players. You can't pick a winner at this point. I think that's what makes it so exciting.
I love that. Definitely always a lot of speculation in the media around who's going to survive, whose business model actually works. So yeah, definitely an industry and a space to continue watching as well. Marilena, I wanted to come to you because I know we're short on time, but I really wanted to also talk about the aspect of diversity in fintech as well. So we've spoken a bit about financial inclusion, around access to financial products, but also from the Future Fund, you've got amazing amounts of data, and we've really seen that kind of female-led startups receive less than 1p in terms of every pound invested in the UK. So have you seen any interesting trends and really taken an interesting approach around diversity in terms of the companies that you're working with as well?
And I think in terms of the way that the great thing I guess we've seen with the Future Fund, obviously it's kind of a bit democratizes the way things are done, but at the same time, because it is an investor-led program, again, it doesn't go to the heart of addressing, you know, looking at the female founders and the situation. But obviously what we've asked parties was to sign up onto the Women in Finance Charter and making sure parties understand, you know, the importance of diversity, and a lot of work has been done in the bank as part of our funds, as well as looking at just diversity and inclusion, looking at ESG, and all of that is kind of to the front of the agenda. And I guess we are seeing some changes, but there's a long way to go, I think, to come to a place where we feel that, you know, all those imbalances, and not just gender, but in all sorts, I guess, be, you know, gendered, being regional, being social backgrounds, being anything else. I mean, it's not just about gender, but we can see that there are, you know, there's a lot more focus on diversity and inclusion as part of the whole ESG and impact agenda. And it's all about also changing both the investors' mindset as well as the founders. I guess it's giving both parties the tools and the opportunities. So a lot of focus in building up on our finance hub as well, and access to information, which is quite important as well to support you know, parties from a more diverse background to have the tools they need to be able to access the finance they need, and giving them the best chance, I guess, to access that finance. But we do see a change, but you can see there's still a lot of way to go, especially in the venture funds and space. I mean, we you know, as we said, you know, in the Future Fund, we've seen a lot more diversity in the base. I mean, because obviously, again, it was a lot more open to, in terms of the way it was set up and the availability of funding and all of that. It was to allow as many parties to come through as possible, and, you know, without prohibiting any. So, but still, and that's why we do have better statistics in terms of, you know, more than half of the parties being from diverse backgrounds. The same way with a mixed gender, again, having better statistics than what you see on average leverage, but still, there's a lot of work, I think, and that's the focus, I guess, with the bank as well, as part of our whole ESG. And as you have now the new chief impact officer as well in the bank, and the focus is pretty much on that, and the agenda is changing quite a lot in terms of what we look and what we will be looking from our delivery partners as well. Of they should be looking at the whole kind of wider ESG when thinking about making their own investments and funding.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you so much. I know Sahel will have a perspective on this, just to quickly come to you.
Yeah, no, just super quick as we run out of time. I agree with the last point. I mean, there's still a long way to go, right? The reality is there. I think it's, you can come up with plans and processes and programs of work and whatever. The reality in terms of the numbers and the diversification is obvious. I don't think we need to have a debate around that. I think the debate is around the whether this brings more opportunities, whether it brings conversations around solutions that are profitable and add revenue. And I think not enough people are engaged in that, particularly from if we move away from the model type people who are involved in the industry to people with different socioeconomic backgrounds and those individuals that don't have the opportunity, who may have very good ideas and strong ideas, and understanding their backgrounds. If somebody comes in to pitch something, the fact that they might have 3 jobs is because they've got a poor background or not coming from a background where they've got money that will support them. And that should be seen as a positive, not as a negative. It should be seen as okay, we get it. We get that you want to, improve things and come up with an idea. But because you don't come from the right socioeconomic background doesn't exclude you from getting that funding or the next level conversation. And I think that's also important to realize as well.
Completely agree. And just as we close up, I'd like to just quickly go to Luke from Bluefire AI around what would you say to maybe some people on this call right now that feel like they want to give up with working with corporates, maybe due to the pace or the onboarding requirements? Do you have a final, I guess, word of inspiration?
Yeah, don't die in the long yes. Work out quite quickly if it's a yes or a no, and don't get too excited if it's when people are all excited but they're just, there's not really a yes at the end of it. Try and work that out really early. So have fun in the quick yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Luke. And I'm afraid to all our attendees and speakers, that's all we have time for. Thank you all so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've taken so many notes and I hope you have too. This 90 minutes has really flown by. So hopefully you feel like you've learned a lot more about FinTech case studies and partnerships and really diving into some detail around some real life use cases as well. If you enjoyed this, as a reminder, as PwC, we are running a couple of events during UK FinTech Week. So we'll quickly share the link in case there are other events you want to attend as well. But otherwise, thank you for your time and take care.
Thank you.